I'm going to jump straight into it. So, my chat today is going to be around UX kind of research. I think Tenaya and Nicola mentioned a bit around the process and the problems around that, and UX being something that has certain ways of being done and our roles and responsibilities in that space. And hopefully, what I share today, again, this is just my perspective. This is just a journey, a snapshot of what I've picked up along the way. Funny enough, I started life as a developer. So I was doing a lot of programming language and things like that. And as Iggy said, found my way into analytics and then found my way into design and then found my way into content creation and just amalgamated it all into UX and then UX research and strategy and whatnot. And it's been a real joy and a real life lesson having navigated through all those crafts and seeing how they all come together. So hopefully this is a bit of a knowledge drop for you guys that you get to enjoy. Again, the album version that you get now, I got my man on the front there. I kind of got this ain't got no time for UX research. I hear that a lot of the times back in the day, until as we were figuring out how to make time for that and tips and tricks, hopefully that will guide us in that. I would say being advocates for change, instead of just accepting, like we said, accepting the norm and then raging at home in our pillows and shouting at empty spaces. So hopefully this gives you guys some insight into that. But first, to begin with, I just want to give us some view. I don't know how much of a lag this will have. Pushing next, my slideshow. For some reason, my slideshow is not slideshowing, Iggy.
I know you uploaded it locally. Can I suggest, do you have your slide on your machine?
I do, yeah.
Maybe we use that.
Cool. I'm going to just switch off presenter quickly.
Cool.
All right, you guys just let me know when you can see my scram. Can you guys see what I see?
Can not in presenter view yet. There. Can.
You got that? Nice one. All right. Cool. So I take it I've got a thumbs up from folks that everyone can see.
Yep.
Nice. All right. Well, like I said, I'm a bit of an 80s kid. I was born in early 80s, so I really dig this kind of retro album back in the day vibe. So let me get cracking here. As I said, just to set the tone here, UX researcher, it's an interesting term because when you do the investigation, it's an old French term. The word actually research is a French vibe. I'm gonna give it a bit of a French flair. I'm gonna say rechercher, which means to seek, search, or investigate. So it has a prefix of again or a new with the re, and then cheche for the search. So I often see UX rechercher as a intentional and repetitive seeking of truth in UX. And I think that's a good way to frame this, where we all have a responsibility, and how much we put in that to degrees is going to get a certain outcome. And again, we've all got certain skills, which is great because you do what you do well. And then how you have that growth mindset is how you leverage things that hopefully I'll share today that you can pick up and use in your own space. And it matters, folks. Cheap as creepers. Eh? How big is UX research now? We've heard it in a couple of our chats today. It almost becomes a extra limb of It's almost like graphic design became UI, became UX, became UX strategy, which became UX design, which became now UX research. It seems to be multiple, almost like children from a parent that get born from one topic or one craft. So it's so big right now. As we said, it's an industry now. There's places like Chris's, How Might We, they're doing wonderful stuff in that space. I think we all know the Norman Group and Maze and our very own Azzy. I mean, hopefully they take wind and take sales and become a real powerhouse in the South African space. I know I would definitely use them if and when they, I wouldn't say if, I'll say when they all come together and we can do our thing. And I think it's clear and evident based on some of the reports that are out there now that embedding UX research into our work. These are just stat stuff, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I think we all know that it improves the product usability, the customer satisfaction, engagement. It creates better product market fits, it improves customer retention, and it increases revenue. Again, that's revenue for business, unless you own your own business, but ultimately, I guess, bottom line means hopefully someone gets a salary so that you can pay for some food and petrol to get back to work to earn more salary, to pay for petrol to get back to work and earn more salary. So hopefully at the end of the day, you can see that it does matter. And how it matters, I think, impacts us in 4 different ways. A lot of us know this is job to be done. You'll see how this all wraps up in the sense of understanding your space. So I look at the 4 jobs. I think that Prof. Clayton chap who spoke about the milkshakes, among other things, and the straw, he was looking a lot around the product's job to be done, which was super interesting because then there's also the customer, the consumer, the client, whatever you want to call them. I'm not going to call them the user, so let's make sure that that's clear. But let's say that that's the other job to be done. They've got a job. But I think in our space where we all relate and where we all spend most of our day to day is the designer's job to be done. These things can be anything from understanding the brief, looking at inspiration on sites, maybe use Mobbin, maybe use Pulse, maybe use growth.design or who knows what out there, but you've got this job to be done. Maybe it's creating the solutions. Maybe you're that UI professional and you spend a lot of time doing your thing. Potentially there's creating the solutions, which leads to also in parallel testing those solutions. Where's my mouse? Oh, there it is. And testing solution takes a varied bunch of forms. I think I'll chat a bit about that today. And presenting back, so vital. I've seen so many presentations and solutions fall flat on their face because of a spelling error. So presenting also, it's almost its own craft. You almost need to take a speech or a Toastmaster course these days just to get across. I think that's a skill a lot of us don't get to flex a lot. So being able to present back is very key, but also jobs to be done for the person viewing your presentation. Think about them. Like I mentioned, that spelling error, these people, these stakeholders, these executives, these product owners, whoever they are who are looking to you for advice and guidance and solutions and whatnot, they've also got their own jobs to be done. They've got to reach certain milestones, or they've got some kind of a T objective or a quarterly performance review or something that this all relates up to. So they're going to make sure that those areas are all covered and it gets very businessy for them, and bless their souls, they're stuck in this almost rat race of achieve. So thinking about their jobs to be done and the time that they have to do it in is also a consideration for us. So understanding these jobs means how do we place ourselves in a position of strength, that when we get put in a moment to flex, we get that. So you got to ask yourself, like, what are you driving? How do you level up? How do you level up that game? Where are you at right now? Are you just starting out? Are you mid? Are you senior? Are you leading? Are you managing? Like, what's going on in your space? Where do you want to be? It's not just about where you're at, it's where you want to be. I think a wise man once said, I don't think he said it, he sang it. He said, you better lose yourself in the research the moment you own it. You better never let it go. You only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to grow. Opportunity comes once in a lifetime, yo. And I think this graph is what I really want to hit home today. I think this is probably one of the most important graphs that I'm going to share today. It's what we see as a growth level visual, where a lot of us currently, you'll see in the next slide, sit in certain levels. It'll either be level 2, which is like a sporadic space, or a limited space in level 1. And that's okay, because there's only up from there. And that's a joy to know as well. It actually gets harder as you go up, and then it gets a bit easier. It's almost like becoming an old person. It's kind of difficult in the beginning as childhood. It gets a little bit kind of more difficult as an adult. and then it gets easy when you're a grown up and you just got to wear nappies and get spoon fed again. So, there's certain curves that go through life, but also through these maturity phases. And what we'll see here is that, like I said, many operate in that sporadic space. Level 2 and 3 are where many people find themselves. It's like this research to be done as ad hoc. It comes in, it kind of gets done as, like, I think Tanaya was saying, like a checkbox sometimes, and it just gets reused if even needed. Or it might be developing that it comes in early and the teams all enjoy that. They kind of get the job done, and some people see the value in it. It ties in with the designs and the solutions, and everyone's happy. But where you really want to be is level 4 and 5. That's where you start owning the space, where people start seeing the value, where it really starts to elevate the craft, but also your value of input and output, because that's when systematic research is continuous, where what you put in is part of what comes out, is part of what goes in again. So again, it becomes almost like this, I wouldn't say this cog, but this cog that everyone's aware of and its value. Level 5 is like is I would say you don't really. I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's shoulder right now. I don't even think you need level 5. A lot of the times, because again, your systematic stuff should be again enough of our space to give input and get output in. But level 5 is all about strategic, where your research starts informing strategy before and after. It really starts to make your, I wouldn't say your own personal light shine in any room, but it also allows whatever you're solutionizing to have a certain bit of credit behind it, where it's trusted to the degree that the work that's been put into the system and that's been shared and been referenced and been aligned with some kind of a solution or a product or whatnot has enough evidence to it that people don't have to worry about it, because they know that it's a sound strategic choice based on the data. Like I say there, it builds trust and UX strength. But I know what you're asking. How do we get there, Dill? How do we get there? It's difficult. Like I said, it's difficult in the beginning because a lot of the times we either designers or we content writers or UX writers, or we have our own little speciality that we kind of work in. And like we said, a lot of the businesses don't have dedicated UX research capacity or facility. So again, spending big bucks on these externals or these US providers or these global providers, it really does get costly. And again, time is always of a crunch. Like we said, those jobs to be done, sometimes those execs need answers straight away. So, finding something that meets your every need, but also gets the job done quickly for yourself, it's quite tricky sometimes, but it's not impossible. Trust me, it's not impossible, because here's a bonus track for you. Some insights are better than no insights, but the right insights are better than some insights. And I think I've learned that, I've had situations myself where just getting 10 people's feedback gives so much value. But then again, I've seen some people get 200 feedback things and it wasn't aligned to the objective, so it wasn't the right insights. So that's 200 insights effectively, I wouldn't say useless, because there's always some gem within there, but it just kind of sets you back a note and you're like, oh my goodness, I've just spent all this time gathering 200 insights and it actually wasn't set up correctly. So I've got to start from scratch again. And that's what you just got to do. But this is a great little bonus track for you. And what I wanted to speak about today, the helpful stuff, how we get this done, obviously to level yourselves up, to give yourselves that moment where you can just elevate and show your goods and know that it's backed up and have the position to say, like, I've done the best that I can do in the time given, is these 4 key framework areas. They create robust research capabilities, they add value to your solution, and it really is, it's quite simple when you start seeing it out, almost like in like a design thinking framework. You'll have this design triangle, which is the explore discovery triangle, which leads to the design triangle, and then that leads to the build or implement triangle, and then into this reporting triangle and the measurement triangle. So obviously there's this kind of linear flow or narrative, and it's similar here. It's having easy access, solid implementation strategies, a clear reporting vision, and then referenceable repositories. I think that you'll see at the end is where you really reach that level 4, level 5 stuff. That's where you can really up your game and start showing value in your own space and take the reins. A lot of the times we go to work, we get the job done, we go home, we go to work, we get the job done, we go, and it just becomes a rinse and repeat where if you take the reins and if you want to own it, then it's up to you. Own it. It's no one's going to stop you from doing good work. But you must be willing to at least have a vision in that of where you want to head to, else you'll just be visionless and stumbling in the dark. No one wants that, especially if you're barefoot. So the do it part. So access, like I said, very important. Establishing brief templates. In my own personal capacity, I have at least 3 brief templates. And these are spaces, when I say access to these things, it's also knowing the job to be done of the designer or the stakeholder or the people who are going to be working on the brief. The last thing you want to do is have a brief that's in Word or Confluence or some other text-heavy thing, but it's for designers who spend their life in Figma and the likes, and it just makes it so difficult for them to actually play a part in it. They're not excited. It's not their space. It's not their jam. So making sure that access to the briefs is great, but also having a variety of briefs. Have a brief that might deal with usability or with surveys or with audits or with competition analysis or something like that, where you can start building it together. And focus on the objectives. I think the 4 key things to have on those briefs is know your objectives, know what classifies as a success to the evaluation, know the audience who you are hoping to target or get some insight from, and know your timelines. Again, adding value within the space and the time is very key, because you want to set the expectations up front. You want to be able to tell the stakeholders in the sessions, like, hey guys, listen, it takes about 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 days or whatever for me to do this based on my best assumptions. So give me the space to do it up front so that they're not caught with their panties down or anything like that. And then you've got to answer to the why did it take so long, and we don't have time for this and whatnot. So again, putting that all up front is great as part of your research brief and include everyone in it. This usually identifies the right formats. Like I said, it might end up being a survey that you need, or a usability test, or a preference test, or something of those lines, where the objectives and the needs and the audience start kind of, I would say, shining a light on how best you can add this value to your solution. And tips might be things like I said, use FigJam or Miro when you are doing these things, because a lot of the times it is the designers who are working on the briefs, because it's their point of truth. It's their guiding light. It's their lighthouse when they are trying to navigate the oceans of product owners and expectations therein. So they're also great for organizing and exporting. So again, when you got to move fast, use the tools available. Like I said, FigJam or Miro. Spend a lot of times when I build the brief in our FigJam, and then all I do from there, I'll export them to slides, or I'll create some kind of a thematic around what we got, and then those will get exported quickly to a slide deck for me to share with, again, additional stakeholders if they're more keen on PowerPoint presentations. So it all helps at the end of the day. Part 2, implementation. This is the cool stuff. This is the nitty gritty. This is when you hit the ground running. This is the real kind of legwork stuff, and it's the enjoyable stuff. This is the stuff we should be excited about. And it doesn't have to be cray-cray. We don't have to be in a position of, oh my goodness, I'm so daunting. I don't like speaking to people. It's cool if you don't like speaking to people. Take someone with you if you can. I've got there a few hints there, if you can, find an audience. If not, test with family, your community. There's always someone there to help you out at the end of the day. I think we always cut ourselves off from that in this isolationism kind of space of I'm scared to engage. But trust me, if it's something worth testing, you'll find someone to test it with. And don't lead the questioning. It's quite clear that a lot of the times we might want the result that meets our expectation. So make sure you go through the questioning quite a few times to make sure that you're not leading the expectation there. Use pen and paper if you must. I've had a couple of moments where my tablet at the time died on me, and I'm like, oh no, dead end, brick wall. And all I do is I just sledgehammer that wall with the pen. I just chip away, and I'm like, you ain't going to stop me. I'll use a pen and paper if I have to. And we hit the streets with a pen and paper. We go get the feedback. I'll go walk the streets of town for an hour, speaking to people and getting the insights I need on pen and paper if I must. Record where possible. Sometimes it is getting a moment of truth recorded, whether it's obviously privacy enabled and whatnot. But if you can record a person when and how you can, quite difficult, but if you can do it. And like I said earlier, travel in twos. I find it's really special because at the end of your engagements, relaying it with the person who you've gone with, oh, did you notice that? Oh, did you see that? Oh, I picked up this. And you almost find 2 or 3 takeaway nuggets from that engagement that by reaffirming it and repeating it with the person that you're with, it almost embeds it into your narrative for a later results comprehension, where if you're starting to create the results, you have this flashback in your head of that repeating moment of, yes, that's a takeaway that we got from that day. It's such a valuable nugget. I'm going to remember that. And know when enough is enough. Again, like I said, go out for an hour. A lot of the times you'll get people saying, how many people did you test with? And when you tell them, well, I tested with 12 people, and they're like, is that enough? I wonder. And you can hit them with all sorts of research around the kind of the diminishing returns on more than 16 people, and you can get certain patterns of results from that and whatnot. And again, it makes sense from an academic point of view, and it validates a lot of it, but also know when your enough is enough for your solution, because again, this is meant as a support to evaluate an outcome. Again, it's not there as the main thing. It's there to enable you to do better. And like I said, there's some tips there earlier. If you're in those early discovery phases, use things, free stuff, forms, Google Forms, whatever you need to grab that stuff. If it's in a more moderated or a mature phase of the design or solution mode, use things like Maze, Hubble. There's a lot of, I know those are quite expensive products out there at the moment, but again, there's ways to facilitate outcomes that at least give you some feedback or some credit to your solutions by just getting the job done. Part 3, this is quite an important part because this is almost like the culmination. You've done all the legwork, you've put it all down, and now you actually need to put it together to show some people who weren't there with you on the day and who kind of might have been there in the beginning on the objective setting, but then they come back later, so they were out of the loop or who knows what. This is when you personally have to do some system 2 thinking. This is when you have to dive deeper than what the results show you. Again, sometimes it's great to use AI and trying to get what it synthesizes as a outcome, but I've learned not to trust that. A lot of the times I've been in a situation where they called my tester, whose name was Jamie, they called his name Jeremy. And that immediately throws like some bias or some discredit into the data set because his name is not Jeremy, his name is Jamie. So get it right, AI. So again, just making sure that you use some of your own brain capacity in system 2 thinking and dive deeper to create the connections and understand it back to the objective. That was that next point of, you've set out to go find some goodies, you've evaluated them, how do they tie back to the objectives? And the report should highlight that. It shouldn't be more, I would say a report should never be more than 6 pages long, ultimately, because you bubble up the key findings, and that's what you want to hit home. You want to hit home the top 4, the top 5, the top 2, whatever key findings, not we noticed someone with a blue top, or we spoke to this person and he had funny looking shoes on. That's not the objective. So make sure you tie it back to those objectives. Use templates again in this phase. So when you're at this space, find a good template. Like we said earlier, have a survey template specific report, a usability test specific report, a preference test specific report, where the layout is almost standardized and allows you to, again, quickly, I wouldn't say create these things, but also quality check them at the end of the day. Like I said, a check spelling, super important. Plies. That's like, I wish I'd written 3 plies there, because like I said, I've seen so many reports get hooked up and get torn apart because some exec has picked up a spelling error, and now the whole report is a laughing matter because of this one spelling mistake, which like you kick yourself afterwards and you're like, oh, I wish I had spelled the wrong, but you spelled the and you're like, oh, why didn't I just take that moment? Because now everything's out the window and I've lost them. Then three of them are on their cell phones, they're disengaged, and you might as well just pack up your stuff and leave at that point. Use visuals, but not too much. I've often seen people bombard their reports with this customer centricity. We've got eight playback videos for you. The job to be done there again. I don't think the exec really needs to see eight people's evaluative feedback on something. Maybe one, maybe two, but that's it. Like, know when enough is enough. And like we said there, know that job to be done audience. And again, the next bit there around scannability, think ahead now. Think about, where's this report going to live? Because once you've shown it to the execs, it's going to be in a space where hopefully it doesn't die. So that's where we head on to the next part here. The doing it in a repository, making sure that it lives in a space where you can store it, but it can be reused. This is, like I mentioned, where we level up. This is a space where you can really show your nitty gritty as more than just a designer, where the solutions that you've evaluated have actually found a place to influence other tests or other customer journey maps or other moments of briefing where you're like, yeah, we've actually done some testing on this already. Let me find that out. So save it in an accessible space as well. Allow people to access it. Obviously, don't allow them to edit it, because that's the last thing you need right now, is to have all this stuff higgledy-piggledy and all over the place. But adding tags improves the searchability as well. If you've got quite complex reports or quite complex products and whatnot, start adding channels or tagging that allows the person to scan it and find it easily. Add a chatbot in that space, which is great, where if you've got some kind of an internal bot that you can say, find me all the information on this product done by surveys. So if you've categorized your surveys, if you've categorized the product name or the product public or private or who knows what, allowing that bot to scan it quickly and surface it up for you is really nice in that sense. And again, only save work, like we said, that's final. You don't want work in progress stuff in this final repository. It's a repo to be referenced, not a repo to be continually edited and updated. And I want to change this to final.final._one PHP. PPPX or something, not going to be your best space for that. So again, for final work only. And like I said there, it should inform strategy. It's not a place for insights to die. That's really where we don't want to live. And again, it allows you as well, like I said, a great thing, year in review. Once you've done your year and you've done all this epic work, who remembers what they've done in March of this year? I mean, I'm not going to ask for hands here, but if I asked you what great wins did you have from March of this year, a lot of the times we got like this cricket sound, because they can't remember unless they've stored everything on some kind of a timekeeping system or Jira or Asana or whatever you've got, or you've got to now search your Slack or search your Teams messages for things you've done in March or who knows what. But it builds a great space for year-in reviews where you can say, this is what we've achieved in this year. And you play that back and you get such good credit from your craft. You're like, whoa, these guys are actually doing some epic work over the year. High fives. Everyone gets high fives. Maybe there's some snacks on the table and everyone enjoys themselves, but it really is a great time to be in that position of strength where you can reference back and think continuous improvement. Like I said, just because your insight lives there doesn't mean it's where it dies. It's where it starts informing other strategy, but it also allows you to come back and check it up again. If you run the same survey 6 months later, has the implementations or the recommendations you've done shifted the needle at all? Are we seeing more positive sentiment? Are we seeing people able to complete a task or navigate somewhere because that's what you tested in the first place? So having something as referenceable but also continuously improved upon means that you're in a real space of I won't say owning your shit, but also being in a position of knowing where the end game is for you and for everyone else around you. And I'm going to end it off here with a bonus track as well. This is something I picked up the other day. I thought it was super cool. There is a difference between validation, which in a way is proving truth, and evaluation, which is finding truth. So again, a lot of the times we try and validate things, but we validate because we've got a notion or a preconception of what is right already. So we go in there with two and we say, oh, one of these must be right, so I'm going to validate them. But if you go in there with an evaluative mindset, in the sense of they're both wrong, and the winner is based on the data that comes out of it, at least you're in a position of not being too sold on one at the time, but a position of let the research assist my data and my solution outputs from there. And that's why I'm going to kill it right now. So in closing, folks, you got time for UX research. As the guy says on the screen there, I got time. I got time. Remember that UX research matters. Check those stats. Like I told you earlier, all the stuff that improves and that it's actually an industry out there, and it does matter. Know those jobs to be done and the audiences that it tracks with it. So it's not just you trying to get something done. There's other people, there's other players in the space that also have jobs to be done, and how you position yourself in a way helps them be better, but also helps you be better. And aim to level up. Like I said, that important graph earlier of the leveling up from 1, 2, 3 up to 4 and 5, where you know your vision. You want to get to a place where your solutions in your research are continuously developed and inform strategic decisions. And then focus on those 4 deliverables, those 4 frameworks that access the implementation, the reporting, and the repositories. Even if you get one of those right, if you just get the briefing right and you get the templates right and the access to them right, that's already a massive chip of a lot of work to be done, kind of completed on your side, where you can say, okay, I'm in a safe space there. Now let's move on to other spaces of deliverable, like the implementation or like the reporting or like the repository stuff. So don't try and do it all at once. This is like a work in progress for yourself to get to a vision of strength and where you can own your own stuff. And like I said, do it, own it, and thrive. It's up to you to thrive. And ultimately, it's a lovely place to be when you get there, because nothing is better than being in a meeting and then someone asks you that question of, have we got any data to back this up? Or have we got feedback from clients on this? And you say, yes, I do. And then you tell them, and then they're quiet. They're like troop still. There's nothing to be said. Then they look back at the slide. They're like looking at you for a response. And then you tell them, and then they look back up at the presentation, because ain't no one coming back from that. You've told them exactly that you've followed it, and they trust you for it as well, because they know from previous times, from all the inputs and outputs, that you've been on multiple journeys over time, that they can trust you enough to say, he's got this, or she's got this, or they got this, or them got this. I don't know how these terms work these days, but ultimately you've got this, folks. It's up to you, and I know you can do it. That's me, Iggy.
Dylan, as always, thank you so much, brother. Let me just do this quickly. Move. Yeah, let's do that. We've got a few questions for you. First one from Yang So. How would you deal with doing unmoderated testing or testing in general when one is bound by confidentiality agreements and no budget, or if it was allocated in user testing?
So I'm hearing unmoderated. I'm hearing some kind of a legal NDA exposure vibe. I'm hearing no budget, no time. It gets tricky when you start getting thrown all these, I would say, setbacks. It's like someone's trying to set you back. Someone's trying to put you on the back burner for failure. Again, nothing is impossible. It's only degrees of success. So, when you have something that's unmoderated, that's now out of your control, you've put it out there. And I know we've got a lot of pros here who are probably dealing in this space. They probably know better than me. So feel free to also drop a comment in the thread there. But for me personally, it's like if I know someone comes at me and says, listen, Dill, we have this solution, and we come together and we see that it's going to be an unmoderated test because of time constraints, where we don't get a moment to do any qualitative or in-person vibes or whatnot. So we create the link and we send it out, but now in the same breath, they're like, listen, it's quite sensitive as well. It becomes a way of how you build that narrative for the unmoderated. So in a way, when you are seeing how the structure of that survey or usability test or preference test, whatever it is, comes forward, figuring out a way of inclusion or exclusion based on a preset, I would say, selection, is probably your first bet of saying, listen, if you accept this, then you can continue. If you don't accept this, unfortunately, you can't continue. Giving some kind of reference to what they're accepting and why they have to accept. If it's some security risk or something like that, it becomes tricky because, like I said, they're trying to set you up for failure. And it's in their best interest that you get the results, and it's also a way for you to now, I wouldn't say again problem solve, but figure it out in a position of, okay, what's the bare minimum that I can put on this, and build from there to say, okay, if it's unmoderated, I got this unmoderated thing. How do I get people to opt into this and get them accepting it based on these terms? Is it, is it going to be some kind of a required field on a form or something? But yeah, ultimately, that would be my first start, is figuring that out. To make sure that you, as you said, not stepping on any toes, and making sure that you crossing all of legals and compliances obligations to get some feedback for your solution.
Thank you. I hope that answers, Yangso. The next question is from Danny Forsen. What is your take on online testing? So still testing with real people, but over video call. Do you feel it negatively impacts findings?
I think a lot of us have been hopefully in a position that we have done both, that we've had it in person and online. It's a joyous thing. I often find myself, like I said, on the streets and doing the feedback sessions to get what I need done, or a product owner's needs done, or the team's needs done. And it's an interesting, like you said, takeaway when it comes to the online space, because there's nuances you pick up on in person, where if there's a hesitation, or if there's some kind of a language barrier or something like that, that you pick up on quicker when it's in person. But online, I guess it's it has its positives more than its negatives, if that sense. So if you say, do you feel it negatively impacts findings, I don't think it does. I think if you know what positives you're looking for, and if the person doesn't even have a video enabled device. I mean, I've done a lot of surveys and usability tests where the person has had to use their sister's device, which doesn't have a camera, but there's always some value that gets taken out of a well-crafted usability or survey or preference test. That, again, it's not trying to overdo it. If you know that time is of the essence, don't create 50 questions when, based on your objectives that you've set out previously or prior, that you actually only need 10 questions. So again, making sure that you understand the objectives, but also who you're speaking to, means that even if it is online, even if it doesn't have some video capability, or you sitting here and they sitting in bloody Kuruman. I mean, I've spoken to people I'm here in Cape Town. I've spoken to people in Kuruman, and we've got value from those. So I think, yeah, ultimately there is potentially someone who will poke negativity at it, but it's your job to focus on the positivity.
Thank you. Then we've got one more question from Maru. Sticking to the album analogy, I enjoyed all the earworms. Assuming the research repo you're suggesting is a shared one, do you have any advice for building the repo for people who were not involved in or observed any of the research? My worry is that people take insights out of context or manipulate it so it supports their agenda.
Yeah, there's always going to be some form of, I would say, interpretation, I think, is a good word there, because again, hopefully you've constructed your report in a way, like I said earlier, if you can get it done on 6 pages and you focus on the objectives in the beginning and the purpose, if your first page is objective and purpose, and if that's clear and crystal, and the next 2 or 3 pages is your key findings, and your last page is maybe a recommendations page or a kind of a conclusion page. Again, it's almost difficult to corrupt something that is clear enough in its objectives and its key findings that relate to that, um, than the interpretation of someone wanting to manipulate it to fit their needs and their kind of, I would say, expectations to fit a triangle in a square hole. So it becomes difficult. Like we said, it's a repo. It should be open. It should be a space where people can access the stuff freely. And how they then, I would say, use it. Again, it's almost like S. Covey's works of, knowing what you can influence, internal or external. And it's if someone's now using your stuff and they start manipulating it to get their case made better, where the original findings actually was the contrary to that. It's you can't stop that person, but you can, in your way of influence, make sure that your report and how you've structured it is clear enough, that it's factual, that it's unbiased, that it wasn't anything leading, that you've made sure that you've put down the key findings and haven't almost created noise around it. Because by adding more, you've almost created kind of little picking points for people to pick apart. So focusing on those key findings and just hitting it home, making sure that, like, if I can just get these 2 things over the line, that when I leave this room, these stakeholders know exactly those 2 things, and they're probably going to dream about it that night because it was so good. And I really am proud of getting those 2 things over the line. Then I think it becomes more difficult to be corruptible, because how you've built it is the impact on what you've got control in.
Thank you, Dylan. I hope that answers the question.